I bought every single movie starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, because over the course of his career people have heavily criticized his movies and even say he's a terrible actor. So I'm gonna see if this is true or not by watching every single movie starring The Rock and grading each of them in two categories. 1, how good the movie was, and 2, how good was Dwayne Johnson's actual performance. And to be clear about which movies I'm covering in this video, I'm only using the ones that are listed on Wikipedia, except for documentaries, animated movies, and the films listed as cameos. So there will be no Moana or no The Other Guys here. Let's take a closer look at The Rock's film career, starting with his first ever film role.
Hey Scoob, do you know who tucks a mummy into bed at night? His mummy!
The Mummy Returns. Yeah, this movie shouldn't really count because it's a glorified cameo. But for some reason, Wikipedia doesn't consider it a cameo, so whatever. The Mummy Returns is a pretty solid sequel to the original Brendan Fraser Mummy movie. The story is pretty simple, but also effective. Imhotep from the original film is resurrected and plans on summoning the Scorpion King to slay him, to gain control of Anubis' army to rule the world, and Rick and the gang have to stop him. It's nothing too crazy, but it does carry over a ton of the charm from the original film. The humor is still here, the characters are all likable and fun, and it has a very Indiana Jones adventure feel to it. And the cast is great across the board, especially Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz. The movie is held down by its horribly aged visual effects and some story issues though, so for the movie grade, I'm gonna give it a solid 6 out of 10. But let's talk about Dwayne Johnson's Scorpion King. Yeah, The Rock doesn't really add much to this character. For most of his screen time, he's the cursed CGI abomination that we've all laughed at for years. The brief moments where he is a person, his performance isn't anything stellar, but I will say the CGI Rock Scorpion monster is iconic, and I don't think it would have been iconic if it wasn't Dwayne Johnson. So for that, I'm giving The Rock a solid 3 out of 10, so The Mummy Returns earns a final score of 9 out of 20. Get over here! The Scorpion King is The Rock's first ever lead role, and as a movie, this is worse than The Mummy Returns, but at least The Rock has more screen time, I guess. Yeah, this honestly does just feel like a generic straight-to-DVD movie. The story is a very basic revenge plotline, where Matthias, played by The Rock, and his bros sneak into this camp to assassinate Memnon, except they fail, so Memnon kills the bros, which makes Matthias react like this. And then he spends the rest of the movie trying to get revenge, falling in love, leading people, and eventually becoming the titular Scorpion King. This is the perfect example of a divorced dad movie. It's not completely awful. It's not necessarily good. It's worth about $5 in the Walmart DVD bin. It has reasonable production value, the action scenes are pretty fun, especially the scene where Dwayne Johnson and Michael Clark Duncan just start going at it. But the story and the characters are as bland as can be, and the pacing is also super slow. The movie borderline becomes boring at times. So for the movie ranking, it's gonna be a 4 out of 10. As I mentioned, this is The Rock's first ever lead performance, and he was very flat. He's trying to be the stoic, tough guy, and it does not work at all. The brief glimpses of emotion ring hollow, but at least he brings the necessary physicality to the role and can deliver a good action scene. I mean, he is The Rock, that's what he's good at. So I'm giving his performance a 4 out of 10, earning the Scorpion King a total score of 8 out of 20.
How does it make you feel? It doesn't matter how it makes you feel!
The Rundown. The Rock plays a guy named Beck, an aspiring chef who is forced into a life of crime, where to get out he has to go to South America to retrieve the boss's son. The Rundown isn't awful by any means, in fact I think it's better than the Scorpion King, but it really suffers in tone and characters. You see some really harsh depictions of forced labor and how terrible the regime that runs this town is, but for most of the movie, The Rock and the beta male are just goofing off in the woods. Those different aspects did not mesh well for me. Also, Travis, aka the beta male, is generally unlikable and Sean William Scott gives a poor performance. And then there's Christopher Walken as a very typical evil dude who goes on and on about how these people are animals. But despite all of that, the movie can be pretty funny and has some absolutely insane, goofy action sequences. I mean, where else can you see The Rock fight 3 dudes with whips or hold an M14 like it's a handgun? He's M14 gang, by the way.
One by one.
I win every time, because I'm the best.
Also, Arnold Schwarzenegger shows up for like a second, so cool, I guess. The movie's gonna get a solid 6 out of 10. And this is easily the best performance of The Rock so far. He's still pretty flat at times and not all that emotive, but he's allowed to be more comical, which is his strong suit, so 5 out of 10. The Rundown gets a total score of 11 out of 20.
We tell ourselves that we are
the walking.
Tall! Walking Tall. Dwayne Johnson plays Chris Vaughn, who returns to his hometown after many years only to find it riddled with crime, corruption, and degeneracy. And after getting nearly killed, he decides to fix up his town by becoming a sheriff and destroying this criminal underground. Walking Tall is a remake of a 70s movie starring Joe Don Baker. It's also based on a real-life dude named Buford Pusser, but we're not gonna talk about that because according to recent findings, Buford Pusser murdered his wife and then blamed it on the mob.
Holy shit! God damn! God!
The movie itself is a decent little action flick. A fictionalized version of the main character is well characterized as someone who wants to do good, even when everyone else has accepted their circumstances. The action scenes are appropriately brutal and fairly enjoyable, and I think the side cast is reasonably fleshed out, with talent like Johnny Knoxville, Kevin Durant, and Neil McDonough as the film's main antagonist. The pacing is pretty quick though, probably because of the movie's breezy hour and 14-minute runtime minus credits, but still, it's an enjoyable enough movie, so I'm gonna give it a solid 6 out of 10. As far as The Rock's performance, this is another fine portrayal, but nothing special. He's charismatic and likable, but he kinda just has this one facial expression the whole time. So his performance is gonna get a 5 out of 10, meaning Walking Tall earns a final score of 11 out of 20.
We're gonna be cool beans.
Be Cool is one of the few movies we'll talk about where The Rock isn't one of the main characters, so we'll be pretty brief. But essentially, it's a satirical crime comedy movie set in Hollywood, where John Travolta is trying to make a jump from the movie industry to the music industry, but the mob is trying to kill him, and a bunch of hijinks ensue. This is a fairly oddball and wacky movie. Not every joke lands, and I don't really care for many of the characters, but the movie is pretty funny at times, especially because of its huge cast. John Travolta, Uma Thurman, and especially Vince Vaughn are all pretty funny here. But also, this is one of those comedies you forget about immediately after you watch it. So the movie score is gonna be a 4 out of 10. But my favorite part of Be Cool is honestly Dwayne Johnson's Elliot. He's just a struggling actor who's trying his best to make it big. He's not a particularly good actor, but he has the one thing that no other actor has. This is also, I believe, the only instance where Dwayne Johnson plays a gay character, and so his performance is exactly what you would expect, and he was honestly the highlight of the movie. So The Rock's performance is gonna get a 5 out of 10, so Be Cool gets a total score of 9 out of 20. Doom. Oh, sweet Doom. This has long been considered one of the worst video game movies of all time, and yeah, it absolutely is. I'm not going to get into all the differences between the movie and the games, but there is a lot of iconic Doom things that are missing or changed in this film. Doom Guy is nowhere to be found, and the monsters in the movie aren't even demons anymore. They're aliens for some reason. This ancient civilization created a serum that gave people extra chromosomes or something like that, which turns some people into Captain America and turns other people into this.
What the hell is even that?
And can we talk about how this is just a shameless ripoff of Aliens? A group of tough space soldiers travel to this facility that has been taken over by these freaky aliens, and then the soldiers are picked off one by one. This story is also just really boring. The first third is the soldiers slowly exploring the facility and trying to find out what happened. The second third is them slowly getting killed off by the alien creatures. And the final third is when the movie becomes somewhat entertaining, and everything has gone crazy, and The Rock and Carl Urban are fighting each other. So Doom is gonna get a 1 out of 10 score. And then we have Dwayne Johnson as Sarge. Sarge has this arc of going from a basic soldier to a full-blown psychopath. He completely loses it, and it's hilarious. The Rock doesn't really have the skill set to play crazy, so his attempts at playing a psychopath just look hilarious. I mean, look at his eyes. What is he doing? And he has so many hilarious lines in this movie.
I'm not supposed to.
Yeah, this has to be The Rock's worst performance so far, so I'm gonna give him a 1 out of 10 here, which means that Doom scores a spectacular 2 out of 10.
Now watch this drive.
Southland Tales is a freaking weird movie. It's a dark comedy set during a fictional World War III, and everything is awful. I'd say more things happened, but honestly, I'm not quite sure if anything actually happened. The whole point of this movie is to criticize Bush's post-9/11 politics. I was a baby when 9/11 happened, so I have no clue what was really going on during that time. I just know that older millennials and Gen X complain about Bush a lot, and that's pretty much what this movie is. The political jabs of Southland Tales are about as subtle and as well done as The Boys. This movie has a pretty big cast with Sarah Michelle Gellar and that one guy from The Rundown who I don't really care for, and Jon Lovitz as the funniest evil cop I have ever seen in a movie. The pacing and story aren't particularly good. I watched this movie at 2x speed and it was insanely slow. Also, Justin Timberlake narrates the movie and he's saying cringe the whole time.
They appear like angels under a sea of black umbrellas.
Yeah, this movie's getting a 0 out of 10. It's bad. But let's talk about Dwayne Johnson and his character, Boxer Santoros. He's this popular action movie star who gets wrapped up in this grand conspiracy and begins to have visions of the future. He's not a particularly compelling villain in any way, because this movie isn't particularly compelling. But I did appreciate the crazy acting from The Rock. Whenever he acted shocked or pondered really hard or went on a schizo tirade, I was there. That's what I want out of my Dwayne Johnson movie. But still, his performance gets like a 3 out of 10. So Southland Tales gets a total score of 3 out of 20. The Gridiron Gang. The Rock plays Sean Porter, a counselor at a juvenile detention center, who after being fed up by the never-ending cycle of young kids getting killed by gang violence, decides to start a football team to give these kids another chance at life. I love a good sports movie. Everyone loves a good sports movie, and that's what this is. It hits the emotional beats you want, it's as inspiring as you want it to be, and you can really get connected to the characters. It is a bit of a more soapy movie, sure, and it follows a lot of the same beats of similar sports movies. I think it does an exceptional job at showing the real threat of gang violence. Early on, we see kids get killed in a drive-by, and while it's not gory, it's brutal as heck. The cast of kids do a really solid job all around, and the football scenes are well filmed, look good, and are pretty entertaining. So despite some issues, the Gridiron Gang is a solid 7 out of 10. And The Rock gives what is easily his best performance so far. You really buy him as this guy who wants to make these kids better, and I think he kinda sells the more emotional scenes. He knew what the assignment was, and despite some moments of flatness and some odd line deliveries, he delivered. So his performance is getting a 7 out of 10. And so the Gridiron Gang earns an impressive 14 out of 20. That's right, another Dwayne Johnson football movie. Disney's The Game Plan. I remember watching this movie a bunch as a kid, but I don't really remember the movie itself. The Rock plays Joe Kingston, whose life gets turned upside down when the daughter he never knew he had drops into his life. This is a pretty typical mid-2000s Disney family movie, but it works and has all the familiar beats you want. At first, Joe and his daughter don't get along, but she slowly grows on him. They fight, he sings her a little ditty, and then she winds up the most important person in his life. It's full of those family-friendly hijinks, it's reasonably funny, even though a lot of these jokes are for kids and maybe won't work for adults. It's not an exceptional movie at all, but it's funny, sincere, and maybe the only place you can watch The Rock doing ballet, so the movie gets a solid 6 out of 10. And The Rock is pretty hit or miss as Joe Kingston. I say this because he has to play the character's full character arc from beginning to end. He has to go from the egotistical narcissist to this more sincere father figure, and shockingly, I think he's better as the caring dad than he is as the huge ego football player. In the beginning of the movie, he was super over the top and borderline inhuman, but he does deliver in the comedy and is surprisingly good at singing like Elvis. So I'll give his performance a 5 out of 10, meaning The Game Plan earns a total score of 11 out of 20.
And I bet you're wondering, why do I know so much about Michael Scarn? Well, because I am Michael Scarn.
Get Smart is about Max Smart, a control analyst who wants nothing more than to be an agent in the field. And after the control base is attacked, he's paired up with Anne Hathaway's Agent 99, and he finally gets his chance. This is another one of those spy comedy films I feel like we got a lot of during the late 2000s and early 2010s, and compared to a bunch of them, Get Smart honestly isn't that bad. It's certainly better than Spy. Do you remember Spy? Who the hell decided Spy was a good idea?
I'd say you'd better start.
The comedy works pretty well mostly because of this cast. Steve Carell is great as Max Smart. He delivers the eagerness the character has and is exceptionally funny during the slapstick scenes. Anne Hathaway compliments him well, and the two make for a great pair. The story is pretty typical. A bumbling buffoon who makes a ton of mistakes but has a big heart eventually proves himself and saves the day. It's nothing you haven't seen before, but it works fine here. And I think the action scenes are honestly pretty epic. Get Smart is a little generic, not every joke works, and the big twist with the main villain can be seen a mile away, but it's still a pretty funny spy comedy with a great cast, so it's gonna get a solid 6 out of 10. And let's talk about Dwayne Johnson's Agent 23. This is the most obvious twist villain of all time. He's barely in the movie until the very end, but he's The Rock, so of course he's the secret main villain. And both the character and the performance are both very forgettable, partly because of the lack of screen time, and he never really feels that threatening. But Max stops him by giving him a big smooch, so that's kind of funny, I guess. The Rock's performance gets a 2 out of 10, meaning Get Smart earns a total score of 8 out of 20.
Hi, I'm the Wicked Wiener.
Race to Witch Mountain. Well, that mountain, silly? I mean, what really is there to say about Race to Witch Mountain? It's a painfully dull movie with a super generic plot. The Rock plays a cab driver who's trying to live an honest life, but gets sucked into this alien adventure story where these two alien kids have discovered something that could save both of their worlds, and so they need his help to get to Witch Mountain. It's as basic as a cross-country adventure movie could really get, and it's made worse by the characters. None of them are good. The Rock, Scientist Lady, Thing 1 and Thing 2. There's nothing good about any of them. They're all just bland and lacking in any personality. I think the movie is trying to turn these characters into an almost found family, but it completely falls flat because they barely classify as characters. And the directing, the action, the special effects, just about everything else about this film is generic and lacking in substance. This movie earns a whopping 3 out of 10, and this is another pretty bad Dwayne Johnson performance. Because Jack Bruno is barely a character, The Rock can really only be himself. So I really don't blame him for this nothing burger of a performance, because he was given nothing to work with. He gets a 3 out of 10 for this movie, meaning Race to Witch Mountain earns a total score of 6 out of 20.
There is no Easter Bunny. There is no Tooth Fairy.
Tooth Fairy. The Rock plays a jaded hockey player named Derek, who gave up on his dreams of being a Major League Hockey player, and now kills dreams for everyone else in his life. But he becomes the Tooth Fairy he was so sure wasn't real, and now has to balance his new responsibility with his career as a hockey player and his girlfriend and her 2 kids. This sounds like a nice movie, right? Yeah, well, this whole film is basically a ripoff of the Tim Allen Santa Claus movie. You have this guy who's super job focused, has a bit of an ego, and has a bit of a strained relationship with the main kids of the movie. But because he did something bad, he now has to take up the mantle of the film's mythical figure. And even though at first he doesn't want the responsibility, he's forced into it. And over the course of the film, he fixes his character flaws, forms closer bonds to the kids of the movie, and accepts the magic of either Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy. There are differences, of course. These movies aren't one-to-one at all, but there are so many similarities I couldn't help but to notice. But this isn't as good as the Santa Claus because it's not as funny, the main character isn't likable, and there's really nothing memorable about it. It's getting a 4 out of 10, and The Rock honestly isn't much better. He doesn't add anything unique to this role, and frankly, Derek could have been played by any actor. In fact, in the sequel, they replaced The Rock with Larry the Cable Guy, which honestly sounds more entertaining. The Rock's performance is getting a 4 out of 10, which means Tooth Fairy earns a final score of 8 out of 20.
My name is Barry Allen. I am the fastest man alive.
Faster. After being injured and imprisoned, Driver, played by Dwayne Johnson, seeks revenge on the people who killed his brother and tried to kill him, while a hired gun and a cop search for him. Faster is a pretty simple movie, but it's made more interesting by how it unfolds the story. Over the course of the runtime, we get little sprinkles of what happened to The Rock's character and why he's going around ruthlessly killing these people, which continues to the final twist of the movie that Billy Bob Thornton was the last person on the list and is a crooked cop. The characters mostly work too. Billy Bob Thornton cop is pretty well characterized. His actions destroyed his family and he just wants to rebuild it and leave the past behind. I will say though, the hired gun character named Killer is kind of a funny character. He's this super obsessive dude who needs to find The Rock and take him out. But then he has this side plot where his girlfriend is mad at him because he wants to get The Rock, and I just don't care. Every scene involving this dude is hilarious, and it was not intended to be hilarious. The last thing I'll say about Faster is that it's a fairly brutal movie, and that works in the film's favor. It makes the action scenes stand out more, and it grounds the movie, except The Rock getting shot in the head twice and living. That was kinda insane. Dude is straight up just immune to bullets, I guess. Faster is getting a 7 out of 10. I've said The Rock has delivered flat performances a bunch in this video already, I know, but that's also true here. He's fine whenever he needs to have a tough, stern face, but this role has a few more really emotional scenes that he completely fails at. Like the moment where his brother dies, he's just like,
I'm gonna kill you all.
His performance is getting a 5 out of 10, meaning Faster earns a 12 out of 20.
Family, 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 family.
Fast 5. Believe it or not, I have never seen any Fast and Furious movie before, and instead of watching the first 4 like a sensible person, I instead started with 5, and I'm only watching the Dwayne Johnson ones for this video. Since this is a popular franchise, I'm not going to give a summary of the story. We all know what these movies are about. Cars, family, ball people, that's pretty much it. Fast 5 is reasonably fun. It's not some high art, but it's also not complete slop. The characters are likable enough and these actors all have chemistry with each other. The humor works, and I like this on-the-run race against time aspect of the movie. And in the guides of that story, we get some of the wackiest action scenes, and honestly, I kinda loved them all. Especially at the end when Dom is using a huge safe like a medieval flail and is crushing cars on the highway. That's absolutely insane. If I had complaints, it is a goofy movie, but it at times takes itself a little too seriously. Also, the pacing slows down, especially during the middle of the film, but other than that, I'm pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed it. It's getting a 7 out of 10. And then we have The Rock as Agent Luke Hobbs. I think this is good casting, only because when he and Vin Diesel have a bald off, it's pretty incredible. These two giants going at each other is pretty fun to watch. But The Rock has a decent little character story of changing his mind and even teaming up with Dom and the others. And I myself also went through a change. Ever since I became an adult, I never had a doctor. Whenever I was sick, injured, or suffering through some emotional damage, I just pushed through it and hoped it would pass. But after a recent health scare with one of my family members, I knew I had to take my health more seriously. And that's where the sponsor of today's video, ZocDoc, can help. ZocDoc is a free website where you can search and compare high quality in-network doctors, choose the right one for your needs, and click to instantly book an appointment. From mental health to dentistry to eye care to skincare and everything in between. Whether you're looking for someone nearby or with specific appointment times, ZocDoc helps you quickly find the right doctor for your needs, with no guesswork or phone calls needed. And because I, like many Zoomers, do not like phone calls, ZocDoc has verified patient reviews and detailed doctor profiles. And you can find more than 100,000 providers across nearly every specialty. Plus, ZocDoc helps you get appointments fast, typically within just 24 to 72 hours of booking. And you can even score same-day appointments. There is no need to call doctor's offices and wait on hold either. ZocDoc lets you see everything online so you can quickly make an appointment. So don't be like me who always pushed off seeing the doctor, and go to ZocDoc.com/AnotherNick to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. And you can also find the link in the description below or scan the QR code. Thank you so much to ZocDoc for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to The Rock. But other than that, the character and the performance is nothing special. 5 out of 10. Which means that Fast 5 earns a final score of 12 out of 20.
I'm going on an adventure!
Journey to the Mysterious Island. Kind of funny how this is the second time that The Rock had to use Brendan Fraser's sloppy seconds, huh? The Rock plays a stepdad named Hank, who's trying to connect with his new stepson, Sean. And in order to do so, the two take a trip to South America to find the fabled Mysterious Island. They're joined by a father and daughter who take them to the island, and Sean's grandfather who was already stranded there, and adventure ensues. You know, I could rag on this movie and call it terrible and whatnot, but I can't lie, it was kind of fun. Do the characters do a bunch of illogical things throughout the story? Yes, but they are well characterized, and the cast is great. Josh Hutcherson, Louise Guzman, Michael Caine, and Vanessa Hudgens are all fun to watch. The adventure scenes are effective and show some directorial flair, and there's even some good jokes like when Sean sees Vanessa Hudgens for the first time and immediately falls in love. I mean, I've been there too. I had the exact same experience when I was 5 years old and watched High School Musical for the first time. We're breaking free! Journey to the Mysterious Island gets a 6 out of 10. And I thought The Rock was solid here. Not a spectacular performance, but he was pretty charismatic. You really believe him as the stepdad who wants a closer relationship with his stepson, and he was a solid grounding presence. So he also gets a 6 out of 10. So Journey to the Mysterious Island gets a final score of 12 out of 20.
Oh, 911. No, I ain't calling a snitch.
Snitch is the first Dwayne Johnson movie released in 2013, an absolutely colossal year where he released a total of 5 movies. Frickin' insane, brother was employed. The Rock plays John Matthews, a father and business owner whose son winds up in prison after his friends set him up with illegal substances. So in order to reduce his son's sentence, John has to go undercover for the DEA and get hard evidence against a local drug dealer. Snitch isn't the worst movie on this list, but it's also not not the best. It's a somewhat interesting premise that at times lends itself to some very intense scenes. There is this overbearing sense of dread caked onto the film, and just about every character is depressed. John Matthews' motivation is clear and makes sense as his primary driver, and John Bernthal's character is also great. He's trying to get out of the drug game, but he's dragged back in by John, and you can feel for him and his family. There are some more actiony bits and they all work as well, but I can't say anything from this movie has any real lasting impact. All the pieces are there, but there really isn't anything exceptional about it. Snitch gets a 5 out of 10. The Rock is solid in this movie. There are some moments where he's unable to emote, but other than that, he did fine. 5 out of 10, which means that Snitch earns a final score of 10 out of 20. G.I. Joe Retaliation. A sequel so bad that Channing Tatum asked to be killed off in the opening act. Yeah, these G.I. Joe movies just aren't it. The story here is nothing great, they do a bad job at writing the characters, and the action scenes are horribly filmed. Seriously, there are a bunch of odd close-ups and so many quick cuts, but there are still some cool things about it, like Snake Eyes and Bruce Willis as the G.I. Joe. But yeah, other than that, I have little to nothing good to say about this movie. It's getting a 2 out of 10. The Rock honestly isn't a bad choice for Roadblock, and in a lot of ways, I think he carries this movie on his back. He brings his signature charisma and energy, and can at least make this dull script somewhat entertaining. So for trying his best, he gets a 5 out of 10, meaning G.I. Joe Retaliation earns a 7 out of 20.
Life is pain! I hate
Pain and Gain is kind of an awesome movie. Don't get me wrong, it's kind of garbage, but it's also awesome garbage. It's basically a movie about 3 bodybuilders who attempt to kidnap and extort this rich dude, but everything goes horribly wrong. The movie is directed by Michael Bay, and so many of the directorial decisions are absolutely bonkers. The oversaturation, the chaotic camera movements, everything is just crazy. The cast is fine. Mark Wahlberg and Anthony Mackie deliver solid performances. Tony Shalhoub as the poor dude they tie up and torture is freaking excellent though. He's insanely hilarious here, and even though I think all the bodybuilding scenes are based and Ronnie Coleman pilled, the story is inconsistent, the pacing is terrible, and the filmmaking is at times genuinely disorienting. Pain and Gain is awesome, but it's getting a 4 out of 10. However, The Rock is kinda incredible here. He plays this drug-addicted Christian bodybuilder and he kills it. His biggest strength as an actor is comedy, and boy does that show here. He's acting like a schizo most of the time. It's epic. He gets a 7 out of 10 for this one. And so Pain and Gain earns a final score of 11 out of 20.
Family, family, family.
We got our next Fast and Furious movie, Fast and Furious 6. This one is not as good as Fast 5. And I say this mostly because the story just doesn't work well. They brought back Avatar Girl from the previous Fast and Furious movies I have not seen. And because they did this big amnesia storyline where she doesn't remember who she was or her history with the family, the film has to almost split focus between her storyline and the storyline with the main villain, Owen Shaw. It makes the pacing weird and the overall story much weaker. And it also makes Owen Shaw a weaker villain. He doesn't have much of a presence in the film and he wound up forgettable, but there is still a lot to enjoy here. The action still rips no matter how goofy it is. The humor still works. They were absolutely grilling my man over his 5 head.
You better hide that big ass forehead.
And all the characters are consistent, likable, and overall good protagonists. So yeah, not as strong as Fast 5, but a solid 6 out of 10. Although, it is strange how Gal Gadot frickin' died and no one cared about Han. So much for family, I guess. My goodness. And as far as The Rock, not much has changed here. He's still playing the same character, so he still gets a 5 out of 10, leaving Fast and Furious 6 with a final score of 11 out of 20.
New York, baby! Boy!
Empire State is not really a Dwayne Johnson movie. Despite being on the poster and having top billing, he is straight up not a main character, which is pretty typical for a straight-to-DVD movie. Like pretty much every single Steven Seagal movie doesn't actually star Steven Seagal. It stars some other poor bastard who's less relevant than Steven Seagal. The main character of Empire State is Chris, played by everyone's least favorite Hemsworth, Liam. Chris gets a job at a police office but decides he doesn't like how things are going, so he wants to rob the Empire State Police Station where he guards. I'm gonna be brief, I don't really care about this movie at all. All the characters suck and none of the actors are doing a good job, and it's as generic of a heist movie as can be. This is pure straight to DVD slop in its purest form. It's getting a 0 out of 10. And The Rock's performance is also getting a 0 out of 10 because he really doesn't have much of a presence at all, and I feel lied to by that poster. So congratulations, Empire State. You get a 0 out of 20, and I deeply regret having bought this Blu-ray.
Well, thanks for everything, Herc. It's been a real slice.
Hercules is when The Rock became a capital M movie star. They marketed the hell out of this movie, making sure everyone saw him screaming, sweating, flexing his muscles and all that. The trailers really did make him look like Hercules, but I will say, the role doesn't really fit his acting skill set. It's a very serious, stoic, and at times emotional role, and The Rock's line delivery is pretty funny at times.
My wife! My children! My heart! I loved her!
He sells the physicality of the role perfectly fine, but he fails in just about every other aspect. The Rock's performance is getting a 3 out of 10. This specific version of Hercules is based off a comic book that I have not read, so I don't know how close of an adaptation this is, but this movie's story is pretty meh. The first half is a really basic war story, where this army has to fight a guy named Rhesus, you know, the owner of the pieces, and once he's captured, there's still like 40 minutes left, so of course John Hurt's character and the army Hercules trained is actually evil, and Hercules sees all the sad people and decides now it's the time to have a character arc and become a hero of legend. Just a horrible way to write your main character. The side characters are also pretty meh, and when Rebecca Ferguson walked on screen, I audibly said, oh no, not you too. She tries her best, but man, the character is so dull. The one saving grace for this movie is its action scenes. There is some fun to be had, but those do not save this movie. This movie is just not great. It's gonna earn a 2 out of 10, which means that Hercules earns a final score of 5 out of 20.
Family, 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 family.
Furious 7, aka the sad Fast and Furious movie. Even though I have never seen these movies before making this video, Paul Walker's passing combined with this movie and See You Soon was such a huge cultural moment that I'm very familiar with this movie's legacy. And now having seen it, yeah, it's very effective. The story adds so many stakes, with Deckard Shaw, brother of Owen Shaw, coming back to seek his revenge in hunting down the main characters. It adds a personal connection between the main villain and the protagonists, which makes the audience that much more invested in the overall story. These action sequences are some of the best of the entire franchise. The highway heist is pretty cool and features some impressive stunts. The Abu Dhabi sequence has some car foo, and that part where they jump between buildings is silly, but in a good way. And the whole climax is stunning and has some strong emotional beats. Although this is the movie where people just fully become superheroes. Need I remind you of these classic scenes? The last thing I'll say about it is, yeah, this is a really nice touching goodbye to Brian and Paul Walker. I'm not even a fan of this franchise, but even I got choked up a little bit. This movie gets a strong 8 out of 10. The Rock honestly isn't in the movie all that much. He gets decimated in the beginning, but he comes back to help save the day in the end. Again though, he is playing the exact same character, so 5 out of 10. Which means Furious 7 earns a pretty good 13 out of 20.
Do you have clinical depression?
San Andreas. Something I've never mentioned on this channel before is how I can enjoy a movie from pretty much any genre, except for disaster movies. I don't know why, but they have never appealed to me. They're always formulaic, the character's almost always the same, and the big spectacle they can sometimes achieve just feels hollow to me. And I feel exactly the same about San Andreas. This movie does have absolutely insane production value. You can't discredit the sheer chaos on screen. The VFX artists really did pull off something spectacular with these huge collapsing buildings and this tidal wave, and all the sets and environments and everything looks stunning, but the story and the characters are just so meh. It's a broken family that comes back together because they went through something traumatic, and then of course you also have your funny British side characters. I feel like I've seen this movie a million times, and I like Paul Giamatti, but that's about it. San Andreas gets a 3 out of 10. This is a very typical Dwayne Johnson performance. It's nothing particularly great nor anything terrible. 5 out of 10, which means San Andreas earns a soft soft 8 out of 20.
Clap of my ass cheeks keeps alerting the guards.
Central Intelligence. Kevin Hart plays Calvin the Golden Jet Joyner, an accountant who peaked in high school and feels unaccomplished. But when he re-encounters a loser from his past, Bob Stone, played by Dwayne Johnson, he's thrown into a life and death CIA story. Central Intelligence is just a good old-fashioned comedy movie. It doesn't take itself seriously at all. It has some funny moments, and it's overall a reasonably enjoyable time. Not every single joke lands, of course, but there are a few good lines here and there.
I'm swaddling you. I know what you're doing. I'm swaddling you. I know what you...
And I know everyone dunks on Kevin Hart, but I honestly do think that he's pretty funny here, and as is the rest of the cast, to be honest. Central Intelligence does try to have a deeper story behind it, but it tends to fall a little flat, even though I do like its depictions of body dysmorphia. I feel like they touched on that with the necessary amount of sensitivity. But still, Central Intelligence is kind of a run-of-the-mill comedy. It's getting a 5 out of 10, and The Rock is pretty good here as Bob Stone. I like his over-the-top energy and his nearly psychotic mannerisms. It's pretty good for a comedy movie like this. I'm giving him a 6 out of 10, which means Central Intelligence earns an 11 out of 20.
Family, family, family. Family.
This is the last mainline Fast and Furious movie in this video, because The Rock and Vin Diesel had an IRL balled off and now don't want to make movies together. And this is maybe the weakest of the Fast and Furious movies in this video, but it's still pretty enjoyable. It has a really intriguing premise where this new villain named Cypher kidnaps Dom's ex-girlfriend and son and forces him to go up against the family. And this is a really interesting story element, because it fundamentally tests the main character's ideas of family and his loyalty to those closest to him, which leads up to one absolutely great action sequence with the team going up against him and losing terribly. With Dom kind of sidelined, it allows the other characters to get more moments to shine, especially Hobbs and Shaw, who are both fantastic here. Their interactions and their roles in the film are maybe my favorite aspect about it, but I do have some issues, namely the villain Cypher, or her ramblings about human nature and whatnot just sound dumb. The script is not nearly smart enough for a villain like this.
This kind of person. Pathetic.
Also, the big climax is not great. It has a bunch of heavily convoluted plot lines and things that just don't make sense, and it really drags down what should be a great action sequence. But still, this is a solid enough entry to the series, so it gets a 6 out of 10. And The Rock is still fine as Hobbs, so again, 5 out of 10. Meaning Fate of the Furious earns an 11 out of 20. Baywatch is a movie that, in concept, is a fun premise. A bunch of lifeguards who are so dedicated to keeping their beach safe that they take it upon themselves to stop this drug ring. There is potential for a lot of comedy and action, but unfortunately, the execution just wasn't there. Baywatch really just isn't that funny. There are tons of attempts at jokes and funny situations, but none of them really work for me. And as an action flick, Baywatch also fails. These scenes have a lot of really fast cuts that makes the action hard to follow, and I know this is Baywatch. I know the original show was famous for using slow-mo, but this movie uses way too much slow-mo, which really slows the pace of these action sequences. The CGI also looks really fake, and the characters are nothing to write home about, but Baywatch is funny for the inclusion and exclusion of a certain problematic internet celebrity.
I'm Zane.
You're Zane.
I've made a severe and continuous.
It is so funny to me that they cast Logan Paul for a cameo in this movie and then cut his scene from the finished film. So that's a big oof.
Yup.
Yeah, Baywatch is getting a 1 out of 10. And as far as The Rock's performance goes, I think he kinda shines. Comedy is his strong suit, especially if you couple that with his natural charm and charisma, and he really brings that to Mitch. So he gets a solid 6 out of 10, meaning Baywatch earns a final score of 7 out of 20.
My life is like a video game.
Next up is Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle. Regarding this movie and the other Jumanji sequel, I'm going to talk about The Rock's performance with the other actors, because the performances are the best part of these movies. Dwayne Johnson, Kevin Hart, Karen Gillan, Jack Black, and Nick Jonas are all great at playing these kids. They create that suspension of disbelief that these are actually kids in the video game characters' bodies. Especially Jack Black. He probably stole the show the best.
Oh, this is so much easier. You have like a handle.
The story is good too. The kids are trapped in the Jumanji game and have to find their way out, and each character learns an important lesson. Spencer learns to be more brave. Bridge learns that he needs to work hard and not heavily rely on his physical attributes. Bethany learns there's more to life than just her looks, and Martha learns that she can be more tough. They are good lessons and make the story more memorable. And the production design, the pacing, and the callbacks to the original Jumanji are all great. So both the movie and The Rock's performance are getting a 7 out of 10, which means Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle earns a final score of 14 out of 20. But Zathura still clears, sorry not sorry.
Alien life form must destroy.
Go back, I want to be monkey!
Rampage. The Rock plays Davis Okoye, a wildlife expert who's thrown into this huge adventure when his gorilla friend is exposed to a dangerous chemical that makes him more aggressive and makes him grow to an enormous size. This is the second Dwayne Johnson video game movie, and while it isn't as bad as Doom, it's still not particularly good. In fact, I think it's a complete snore until the final act. A huge creature feature showdown with the gorilla, the wolf, and the alligator is visually impressive and a ton of fun, but everything leading up to it is boring, generic, and feels like everyone is going through the motions. The actors aren't doing a good job, they all feel like they're asleep. That is, except for Jeffrey Dean Morgan. It is impossible for him to be bad in something. The dude was just made for the screen, what can I say? But still, Rampage is really nothing to write home about. 4 out of 10. And The Rock is also nothing great here. He honestly kind of feels like he phoned it in for this one. Also 4 out of 10, meaning Rampage earns a final score of 8 out of 20.
Intellectual property, whatever that means.
Skyscraper. The Rock plays Will Sawyer, an ex-military security consultant for this new advanced skyscraper. And once these terrorists enact a plot to destroy this building and steal something from it, Will has to stop them and protect his family who are stuck inside. Let me ask you something. Do you like Die Hard? Do you like the Towering Inferno? If so, then you can enjoy this derivative piece of garbage that takes from both and adds nothing. Yeah, I really did not enjoy Skyscraper. So much so that this is actually my least favorite movie of 2018. The story is completely unoriginal, the action sequences are dull and have no tension, and even worse, the characters are bland and unmemorable. Tell me, which one of these characters is the main villain of the movie? Trick question, it's none of them. But none of you knew that because no one remembers this movie. It's just plain bad, but Neve Campbell is innocent. Skyscraper gets a 1 out of 10. I can't say The Rock is particularly bad in this movie because he's given nothing to work with. His line delivery is awful because the lines they gave him are awful, but I'll throw him a pity 3 out of 10. So Skyscraper earns a final score of 4 out of 20.
No, wait! We'll use the power of friendship.
Fast and Furious presents Hobbs and Shaw, the first and so far only Fast and Furious spinoff to exist. This is a pretty fun movie, all things considered. The action scenes are still a blast, it's able to have some fun with its super soldiers and its talent, and the humor works too. Both Hobbs and Shaw have some legendary banter, and pairing them up together was honestly a super fun idea. Hattie is a great new character, and Vanessa Kirby brings a lot of her own personality. She's quickly becoming one of my favorite actresses working today. I don't love the main villain and the whole super soldier story. It feels kind of out of place for this franchise. It feels way too sci-fi. And Brixton as a character is just not compelling in any regard. His whole thing is just,
look at me, I'm Black Superman.
Also, I hate that The Rock put his friends in this movie. The Ryan Reynolds and Kevin Hart jump scares were just plain wrong. But still, Hobbs and Shaw gets a 6 out of 10, and The Rock is still just as good as Hobbs, so again, 5 out of 10. Which means Hobbs and Shaw gets a final score of 11 out of 20.
My life is like a video game.
Jumanji: The Next Level. This is a sequel that isn't quite as good as the original, but dang if it isn't funny. Including Danny DeVito and Danny Glover was an inspired decision. Even if they're not on screen for very long, seeing the video game actors portray them works so well, and they create so many hilarious moments.
I mean, I haven't looked like this since
never. You look like this never.
And Dwayne Johnson's portrayal as Spencer is just as good here, but also him doing the Danny DeVito impression was also pretty good. So he's getting a 7 out of 10, just like the first movie. The action sequences still work, the production design is great, and I like the little story between Milo and Eddie, where they set aside their differences and rekindle their friendship. But outside of that, the next level does suffer from some poor character stories. They're just not as strong as the original film, and the characters do things that don't make sense at times. Like, we never get a satisfying answer as to why Spencer went back into the game in the first place. Also, yeah, this movie has Aquafina. This movie gets a slightly worse score of 5 out of 10, meaning Jumanji: The Next Level gets a final score of 12 out of 20.
I am under the water. Please help me.
One pandemic later, and we have The Rock's first film from the 2020s, Jungle Cruise. When Lily travels to the Amazon in search of mythical flowers, she gets the help of a trickster skipper named Frank Wolf. This is yet another Disney movie based on a Disney theme park ride. And while Jungle Cruise isn't bad, it's not all that memorable either. It's a very run-of-the-mill Disney adventure movie. You have your cast of quirky characters who don't get along but eventually become friends. You have your quirky European villain with a funny accent. There's action scenes, a bunch of humor, and a very energetic, adventurous score. It plays all the familiar beats without really adding anything new. But the characters are kind of bland. They're very standard modern-day Disney characters. But that doesn't mean the cast isn't good, because all these actors are doing a pretty solid job. I really like Emily Blunt and Jesse Plemons here, and also the GOAT Paul Giamatti is here too, so Jungle Cruise earns a 6 out of 10. The Rock is fairly enjoyable here. He does have some typical Rock-isms, but sure, he could play a guy named Frank Wolf. Why not? I'm beginning not to care about these later Dwayne Johnson performances. He gets a 6 out of 10, so Jungle Cruise gets a 12 out of 20. Oh man, here it is. Red Notice. Fed is falsely accused of stealing one of these eggs, and so he has to team up with a thief to clear his name and find the real crook. Red Notice is maybe Twitter's least favorite movie, and for good reason. It's terrible in just about every single way. The script, the directing, the visuals. This is the most Netflix movie ever made, and I mean that in a very derogatory way. But worst of all, the cast. Dwayne Johnson, Ryan Reynolds, and Gal Gadot is a truly diabolical trio. I like Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool, but he pretty much makes every character he plays now Deadpool. And so the whole shtick just gets old, and we all know how terrible Gal Gadot is.
And enough champagne to fill my ass.
And she's still just completely awful here. I don't want to talk about this movie anymore. 0 out of 10. But I will say, The Rock honestly isn't awful here. Compared to his co-stars, he is the shining star. So I'll give him a 5 out of 10. Why not? Which means Red Notice earns a final score of 5 out of 20.
Because the hierarchy of power in the DC universe is about to change.
I've already talked about Black Adam on this channel, so I'll be brief. This is a fine superhero film. It has some fun action scenes, a lot of cool characters, and a reasonably decent character story. Teth Adam becoming the hero that the world thinks he is a solid arc, and I think most of the cast does a good job. Pierce Brosnan and Aldous Hodge are the real standouts. The villain absolutely sucks though, so Black Adam gets a 6 out of 10, and The Rock is not great here. He has to play this super stoic dude with a lot of emotional baggage, but it just comes across as dull some of the time. So let's just say the hierarchy of power in the DC universe did not change at all. So I'm gonna give him a 4 out of 10, meaning Black Adam earns a final score of 10 out of 20.
Merry Christmas, you filthy animal.
Red 1. After Santa Claus has been kidnapped, Callum Drift, played by The Rock, has to join forces with a naughty lister named Jack O'Malley, and together they have to find Saint Nick and save Christmas. I guess if you wanted a Christmas MCU movie, here you go. Literally, Red 1 has all the worst attributes of all the worst MCU films. Poorly placed humor, weak characters, horrible special effects, all wrapped up with a terrible looking bow. There are some moments of entertainment, I guess. The Krampus scene isn't awful. And J.K. Simmons as Santa Claus is perfect casting. He was the movie's one saving grace. So Red 1 gets a 2 out of 10, and this film is the epitome of a generic Dwayne Johnson performance. As you may have noticed, I have pretty much said the exact same thing for most of Johnson's recent work, because he's doing the same stuff in every single movie. So he gets a 4 out of 10 for this movie, meaning Red 1 earns a 6 out of 20, but his body of work is about to get a much needed boost. But before we talk about the Smashing Machine, if you enjoyed this video so far, why not consider hitting that subscribe button? We're getting really close to 100,000 subscribers, and it'll let you know whenever I upload a brand new video. But let's move on to... The Smashing Machine. The Rock plays a real-life UFC fighter named Mark Kerr as he deals with his various addictions and life struggles. I've been looking forward to this movie for a while, and man did it pay off, and I'm gonna try my best to avoid spoilers. The best part of this movie has to be its story. From the start, it seems like a generic sports fighting movie, but it honestly isn't. It has deeper layers to it. It's about things more important than the sport, and the main character, Mark Kerr, goes on this absolutely beautiful character arc centered around his addictions. His addictions to drugs, to his girlfriend, and to the UFC. movie. The film was directed by Benny Safdie, and the whole film has a unique, retro, almost home movie feel to it. Despite being one of Dwayne Johnson's cheapest movies, the production value is immaculate, as it really captures the era in which the movie takes place. And Emily Blunt gives a fantastic supporting performance as Mark Curl's girlfriend who constantly terrorizes him. There honestly isn't much I found wrong with The Smashing Machine, so I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. But the best part about this movie is Dwayne Johnson as Mark Kerr. What a genuinely sensational performance. There are moments when watching this film where I genuinely forgot I was watching The Rock. He let himself fade away and became this whole other person, completely capturing Mark Kerr's mannerisms and personality. I was thoroughly captivated by this performance, and I honestly couldn't believe that this was The Rock. He has seriously stepped up his game, and I hope we see more like this from him in the future. After seeing literally every single movie starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, the question remains, is he a good actor? Despite none of his performances going above a 7 out of 10 so far, I'm gonna say that I think he is. He proved himself in The Smashing Machine to be a good actor capable of amazing performances. But will he keep it up and continue to challenge himself? Or will he go back to playing the same guy over and over and over again? Only time will tell. His performance in The Smashing Machine earns a fantastic 10 out of 10, meaning The Smashing Machine earns a final score of 19 out of 20. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, click here to watch me rank the entire first phase of the MCU. I'm also considering dropping a smaller video where I rank every Dwayne Johnson movie, so if you want to see that, make sure you let me know down in the comments.